This is the I Read Comic Books podcast, the very best podcast for regular comic book fans. I'm your host, Mike Rapin, and joining me this week, two star-spangled superheroes. This week, I'm joined by Nick White.
Hey.
And the one and only Paul Jasley.
Hey there, humanoids.
Thank you both for joining me this week. I'm very excited because we are talking about Captain America. But before we get into that, I don't know if you've heard about this thing that we're doing, but it's the zine. It's the IRCB Totally Not a Cult, an art anthology zine curated by us. It's full of 20 different artists, maybe 21. I don't know. There's maybe something on the horizon. We'll see. Doing a bunch of pages for us, inspired by the episode titles of I Read Comic Books. If you haven't checked it out, there's a link in the show notes. Go to ircb.fyi/zine and just take a gander at the preview. I'm telling you, you're going to be blown away. Every single page is incredible. I mean, I've shared it with everybody on the show. It's absolutely wonderful. Paul Jasley is in this thing. I heard of this guy, Paul Jasley. He's great. Danny Martinez, who's on the show, he's in the zine as well. Plus a bunch of other people: Meredith McLaren, Martin Morazzo, Box Brown. I mean, names that I'm sure you know if you've listened to this podcast. It's absolutely fantastic. So go check out Totally Not a Cult. It's on Kickstarter, ircb.fyi/zine. But we're here to talk about Captain America Madbomb Saga. Paul, you reached out to me and Nick, and you said, "Yeah, we got to read this comic book." And you sent us this link. What the hell is the Madbomb Saga? Please tell us.
Well, Mike, for some reason, this comic's been on my mind lately. I read this a couple years ago, and this is a series that came out in the early months of 1976, leading up to the bicentennial that year. And these issues marked Jack Kirby, of course, the co-creator of Captain America, returning to Marvel after his tenure at DC. So this is him coming back to a character he co-created. He's writing, drawing, editing the books himself.
Crazy.
And I have a huge soft spot for Jack Kirby. Obviously, he's one of my favorite creators, and I love unfiltered, unhinged Jack Kirby comics. They're not everyone's cup of tea, but they're fun to talk about. They're fun to read. And this comic came to mind, one, because we have a Captain America movie in the theater right now. And I had heard that originally, instead of the Civil War Captain America movie, they had wanted to adapt the Madbomb story into the third Captain America movie, which would have been fantastic.
Whoa.
But unfortunately, we got Civil War instead. And also, I know I was wanting to read this comic. I don't know. It's merely coincidence that this story is about a secret cabal attempting to overthrow the U.S. government and reestablish a monarchy. I don't know. It felt somehow timely. I don't know if it really. I don't know. Comics weren't woke back in 1976, right? No one wrote about politics, especially not Jack Kirby. So I don't know how that got mixed in here.
Oh, you mean really back when comics were just pure escapism, right?
Right, mm-hmm. Right.
Before any of this stuff got injected into
pop culture. Yeah, I mean, again, I think this stuff's really interesting. We can talk about it as we go through these stories, but it is interesting to read a comic that is, at this point, almost 50 years old, and is about, this group called the Elite that wants to get rid of the government, go back to pre-revolutionary times, have a monarchy in America. You have Captain America fighting against them. And it's literally, written and drawn by a man who bragged about killing Nazis, and that's in this comic. That's in this, and I think it's interesting to have someone like Jack Kirby, whose work is often seen as being bombastic and over the top, to make a comic that is bombastic and over the top, but also politically timely and deeply personal at moments. I think he's filtering a lot of experiences in World War II into this comic, so it's a rich text for a number of reasons. And I always like to talk about unfiltered Kirby comics with anybody. So I'm curious, I'm sure neither of you have read this before. Maybe what's your initial response to this type of story?
Yeah, I mean, we read issues 193 through 200 for anyone out there who wants to pick this up and press pause and then come back. But I mean, I looked at it at first and I was like, man, reading 7-8 issues from the 1970s seems like a daunting task, if only because I find the older books to be a little tough to get into, especially books where Jack Kirby or Stan Lee is involved, and there's a lot of narration and there's just a lot of words, and they're doing the thing that you had to do in the 70s, which is you don't know who's going to be picking up these issues, so you got to kind of rehash everything just to get the reader up to speed, which I found to be very funny in reading this. And at one point there's a little editor's note from Jack that's just because you picked it, you should have picked up the previous issues. If you didn't, oh my god, he's kind of giving you a little shit, which I think is very funny. But yeah, I'd never read this before. I didn't really know what it was about. But of course, issue 1 of this run, it really kicks you in the teeth, and like they're going to do this huge thing. I felt even just in that first issue 193, it was so like clear that Jack had some dissatisfaction that he needed to express and to talk about, like the way that people go crazy, and the only explanation for how the people of the world or some towns or some small cities or whatever are acting is because of a mechanical thing that is warping their minds and causing them to go erratic. I love that as the basis for this story. Now it's stretched out pretty thin, I think, through the run, like the 7 or 8 issues, but it's still a really interesting story. Like, I think overall, I feel very satisfied having read it, because I feel like what Jack is trying to say in this story, he totally nails by the end. I really appreciated that. But Nick, I don't know, what are your thoughts? Where were you coming from with this?
Yeah, I mean, I've certainly read a good amount of Kirby in the past. That said, and Mike, you touched on this a little. It's funny. I think these days with modern comics, if you sit down and you have all the issues and you read them back to back, like in some way, shape, or form, we've decided that is like the ideal or the best or the most optimal way to navigate your way through a story. And if you don't do that, you're just retreading. And weirdly, I almost feel like with this book, it's the inverse. It almost feels like having all of these issues immediately in front of you and reading each one immediately after the last one with like no pause. It almost is like, it's very weird. And Mike got at this a little when he said, there's no knowledge for sure of like who's picking up your book. Maybe this is the only book in the whole arc they'll read. Maybe it's just one. Maybe they'll get this one and then they'll miss the next one because it won't be at the newsstand, and then they'll have to pick up the one after that, right? And so the book takes care to, and no complaints about this. On the whole, I think it's great. I think it's helpful. You have an introductory paragraph or two that talks about the first one is like the broad strokes of the whole arc. And then the second one is like, oh, this is kind of what happened last time. And then at the end of the book, it sets you up and frames the next issue. And then throughout the issue, not only do you get editorial notes about, oh, this is something you probably should have caught, or this is something you should have seen, but there's also even in the dialogue between the characters and the narration captions, there's also just sort of this like rehashing of plot points. And as I said, weirdly, when you read all of these issues one after the other, like it gets a little exhausting, because it's like, yes, I have read all the issues. I have them in front of me. I didn't miss any of them. I do remember this plot point because I read it 10 minutes ago, not last month. And so it's just it's a little exhausting.
It is unique. It is a different way from writing comics than we're used to now. And I think it's kind of like almost exacerbated by the way Kirby writes. His writing is not nuanced. It's, there's no subtlety. It's very over the top. The dialogue is ridiculous at times. His caption boxes are just like huge broad statements. There's over the top, these huge ideas. And like, I don't know if you noticed, but after about 3 or 4 issues, they start crediting Marv Wolfman as the supervising editor, because they kind of needed somebody to be like, hey, Jack, you need to like make this all make sense, fit this all together. It's pretty funny that like they're like, oh yeah, he needs an editor.
Yeah.
And that's why I said it almost feels like I'm reading this the wrong way now. Like the one thing I will say though is that at least when you have Jack writing like that, I find it's at least so much better when he's at least paired with his own art. Because when the writing is like that and it's someone else's art, it just seems weird.
Exactly.
Anyway.
But yeah, so Nick, what did you think overall though? I mean, like if you could give a high level, what was your takeaway? How did you feel about it?
I as Paul got at, it's not the most subtle, but I do think there's still, it's not hitting you on the head hard enough to be like, this is what's happening in America. clearly this is bad. You need to do Y to stop this. It's more, it is more like, here's a story. Do you have the 2 or 3 brain cells to knock around to like look at the state, the socio-political state of things and go, how does this apply to my life? Like, does this apply to where where things stand? And that was also interesting to think about, because obviously I don't really remember a lot of, why do I say I don't remember? I wasn't living at the time when this book came out. So I was like,
Yeah.
what exactly was the state of things at that point? I did look it up, and obviously, this is maybe only a year after Nixon, leaves office. Gerald R. Ford is newly president. So obviously we've got things like the whole resignation and the scandal and Watergate, and clearly you've got some real disillusionment and just a real state of dissatisfaction, just sort of a glimpse behind the curtain to be like, well, what's really going on, and can I really trust my politicians? Can I really trust the state apparatus? And who are they working for, really, right? And Jack explores that, not in a hyper nuanced way, but he explores it.
Again, I think it's important to keep in mind, again, Kirby is someone that, he creates Captain America explicitly to fight fascism, explicitly to beat up Nazis. So it's like,
Right.
I mean, that's baked into the character. And again, I don't know Kirby's, political beliefs, but he certainly seemed to be left-leaning most of his life, and someone that probably saw the broad swath of America and seeing like a rising conservative movement and recognizing, hey, isn't the kind of stuff we fought against, when I enlisted. So, I mean, you literally have a panel, and Mike, thank you for clipping this panel for the episode, issue 196, when Captain America is looking right at the reader saying, the ghost of the Nazi never dies. It keeps going on. And like, it's an amazing moment. And that panel's always stuck with me. And I think that sentiment that Kirby gets at permeates the story. As weird as the story gets, there is a sense that that's what Kirby's talking about. He's like, I don't know what's happening in America right now. It sure seems like we fought against 40 years ago, or 30 years ago. So I think that's why the story is still timely.
Well, I think in both Kirby and Captain America, you have this character that is clearly accustomed to fighting more overt, conflicts with clear-cut enemies, and good versus evil, and what people stand for, and you're going to meet them on the field of battle, and you're going to defeat them, and they are going to go away, and that is the end of it. And of course, 1975, Watergate, Cold War, there's definitely, this idea of like, who is the enemy? Where do they really exist? Who can I trust? And following Watergate, following Nixon, can I even trust my own government? Right? Who are they really working for? And so I think obviously in both Captain America and Kirby, you have this disillusionment and distrust.
Right. But I think that like you read through the Madbomb Saga story, and like there is this through line that I think permeates the entire run here of like Kirby has this innate belief, or at least in Captain America, right? There is this innate belief and love for the American idea, right? The idea of the American democracy and how it is right and it is better than any other option that is out there, right? Like these people who want to bring back this new royalty, right? Like the whole story is built around this idea that they've got this mad bomb. They're going to blow it up somewhere in America, and it's going to make everyone crazy. And then these elites, this new government is going to take over, and they're going to be the new monarchy that can rule everybody. And they're going to turn everybody who was against them into these drones that can kind of work for them, right? It's a classic story of like, he doesn't say the word, like, I guess he does say the word fascist and tyranny multiple times. That's a lie. But he's clearly like trying to say like there's a new variant of this Nazi idea, and it is these weird people who want to bring back the monarchy. But Jack, in telling his story about Captain America and Falcon, really kind of keep this to this idea that like there is a right type of person that can like push back against this, and like Captain America leans on SHIELD, this like government agency. Like, I think it's so funny to read these comics from back in the 70s, and SHIELD's outfit is just guys in like dark blue suits and hats, right? Like they look like Men in Black, right? They look like your stereotypical 1970s FBI agent. And I love that so much, because flash forward 50 years and they're in these little white onesie jumpsuits that are like black and white, and everybody's got a short haircut and stuff. I love the way that Jack depicts like the good guy soldiers and the good guy like FBI SHIELD agents. But like there is this idea that it is never said overtly, but I feel like it is implied heavily throughout the story that there is a right way to do things and to deal with conflict, and Captain America represents that. And like even in his conversations with the Falcon, like Falcon consistently brings up throughout this story, he's like, as a black person, a lot of these things that you're talking about, Steve, don't apply to me. And you need to keep that in mind when you're pushing around ideas about like what's right and what's wrong, because it doesn't always apply equally to people. Like Jack constantly injects that into the story, which I appreciate, because there is a love for the American idea despite its flaws, knowing that eventually, and there's a possibility for potential of America to achieve the righteousness and justice that like all people who are of its people deserve, right? I love that. It's like it's in every issue. Like Jack does not shy away from it at any time throughout this story, and I really love that. Like I haven't read I felt inspired by that, like just in the like despite some of the slogging that may have happened in these issues that we read, like it's still there. It's like it is that through line throughout the story.
Right. I mean, there's literally a moment where Captain America tells Falcon, it took 200 years, but this country has grown up. And like we could argue whether it really has or not, but again, that's something Kirby, who is in his late 50s when he's writing this comic, and again, fought in World War II, he's kind of saying, look, the country's changing, and it was changing for the better. Maybe it's backtracking, but there's still some forward progress. And I love that you brought that up about the Falcon, because I kind of forgot about that. That comes up quite a bit. And it's not like Jack is saying like, oh yeah, racial, that aspect isn't important, where America's what's important. Like that comes into the story. The Falcon is a very interesting character when Jack writes him.
Yeah, and I think. Oh, go ahead, Paul.
I was gonna say maybe Jack could have let somebody else write Falcon's dialogue. I don't think, again, a white Jewish guy in his late 50s should be writing jive, but
we could. I mean, like, yeah, that's a whole other subject, but
can't win them all.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, I appreciate that that's there. It's definitely an uncomfortable conversation that could have Jack could have decided to not have in this book, and he kept it. Especially because I think a couple times, Captain America or other people, I think the general is like, well, the good news is, 200 years have come and gone. Things are better. Like, things are great. And I think on a couple occasions, Falcon is like, I mean,
for some people,
Falcon is like, I mean, it's not perfect. It's not paradise.
Yeah.
And that's great. I'll take it. Again, like it's an uncomfortable moment for the characters. I'm sure it's an uncomfortable moment for some people reading it. Maybe an uncomfortable moment for one of the Marvel editors, but it stayed. And I'm grateful for it. I think that's great. I think like that right there is like the true moment for me of like how progressive this book was, because there are definitely, I have no doubt, there were more than a couple people that were like, you know what? Do we really have to have this? So the fact that it's there, great.
Yeah,
right. I mean, this is a Captain America story, but we call it a Captain America story, but it is Captain America and the Falcon, right? Like that is the story title, right? It's interesting because Falcon is a pivotal character throughout the whole book. Like it's not just a Cap story where Falcon pops in and out. It's like, no, these guys, the whole story is about the two of them working together. I think that's really cool.
Except for the one issue where they're like, in this issue, Captain America has a romance. Also, Falcon will fight people. That is the demarcation of this issue.
Sure, right.
Yeah. I feel like we maybe need to go briefly issue by issue, because like we're glossing over how weird this comic truly gets at times. So yeah, 193 is the issue where, I mean, Jack is back at Marvel writing Captain America. It's a big bombastic story, and this is where we get the idea of the mad bomb, right? This idea that this bomb is really going to drive people crazy. And there's that page where Kirby shows people in the street rioting, and it actually looks terrifying. Like, he's so good at drawing people looking crazed. There's like bloodthirst in their eyes and just wrecking shit. And then
also in 193, Henry Kissinger nearly kills Captain America.
You spoiled. No, I was gonna bring it up. Of course, this is a comic with a Henry Kissinger cameo. I don't think Kirby is endorsing Henry Kissinger. Again, at this point, he's clear. I think he was still the Secretary of whatever
State.
I don't remember, Secretary of State at the time. I think it is just Kirby saying this is how big of a deal this is, that they're going right to the top of the government. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because he doesn't do anything. Henry Kissinger just shows up. They don't even call him by name. He says, "Call me Henny." Right? He doesn't even say, "Call me Kissinger."
Right.
And then he basically just gives them the marching orders. But before we get there, and I think that this is something I want to talk about, to truly, I think, understand why Kirby comics like from this era work the way they work, is that Kirby, again, is from an older generation of storytellers where it's like you have to have something exciting happen on every page. And when you read these comics, like you get the Mad Bomb introduction, then he meets with S.H.I.E.L.D. Like, okay, we're going to send you to the headquarters to get orders about what to do next. They get to the headquarters. They don't just walk right in. They go through a death trap and get attacked because they need to have something exciting happen before they get the payoff. So you get this whole multiple page sequence of Captain America and Falcon fighting through a death trap, almost getting gassed, beating up a bunch of guys before they get the orders from Henry Kissinger. It's so bizarre. But you understand why he does it, because he needs to have something exciting happen. He can't just have two people talking, right?
Yeah. I genuinely thought that like the story was going from 0 to 100 immediately, and that like S.H.I.E.L.D. had been taken over, or they went to this base and they were getting attacked. I was like, what is happening here? Only to realize it's like, no, we just like that something needed to happen. That wasn't them just walking.
Right. So I think that's what kind of makes these comics work. And I think, I love unfiltered, unhinged Kirby, but again, sometimes you do need an outside source kind of like crafting the story a bit, because this story, it does meander. Like you get this overarching story about them having to stop the Mad Bomb and stop the Elite, but you also have an issue about, Jack Kirby clearly just seen the movie Rollerball, so like, I got to do that story. And then like you get the love story, like you get all these other like side things that, it's an interesting writing approach. So, I think what's interesting is that actually the next issue, 194, is when we get the backstory about the Mad Bomb, the elite of this group that's led by this guy named William Torrey, who wants to reestablish a monarchy because America was better before the Revolutionary War when they still had a king. And there's this weird thing that I totally forgot about till rereading it for this time, is that it's a personal vendetta, because it turns out Steve Rogers, Captain America's ancestor, Stephen Rogers, had killed William Torrey's ancestor because he was going to warn the British about George Washington's attack. Yeah. So it becomes a personal vendetta against this guy. I got to find the Steve Rogers guy because his like great grandfather killed my great grandfather.
Yeah. His ancestor looks so exactly like the modern day Steve Rogers. And for a second, I my Marvel knowledge is so great that I was like, fuck, when was Steve Rogers born again? I was like, is this a Wolverine fighting through the Civil War sort of like drag this through history thing? And then I was like, no. And I gotta ask, this feels so on the nose that it has to be the case. Like, Kirby obviously named the guy Tory because the Tories was the name for American colonists who remained loyal to the British during the Revolutionary War, right?
Right.
They were called Tories. That's gotta be... It's gotta be, right? Okay. Yeah. I was like, this would be such a bizarre coincidence if it wasn't. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And then on top of that, we also get this revelation that so they basically go and they invade the secret underground bunker where the elite are established. And then again, this is another weird tangent that doesn't really go anywhere. This story about how the elite are taking people and giving them pituitary gland like experiments to turn into these huge hulking
and
monsters.
Lobotomies,
so they can become the working force that they.
And I felt like Kirby was like, you know what? I want to draw freaks. I want to draw freaks.
Yeah.
Because like if you've read like Commandi or you've read any other Kirby things, like eventually Kirby's like, you know what? I want to draw really like monstrous, like scary, like malshapen. It's
big,
like
gangly armed people with scary faces. Yeah.
Like I want to draw cavemen, right?
Exactly. But yeah, I mean, it's bizarre, but again, I think it speaks to the point we were making earlier, where it's like the comic is inherently political because the elite, they're literally making slaves. And I think the Falcon even like makes a reference as like, oh yeah, it's the same thing happened to, so it's
says something like the brain goes away and the back gets stronger or whatever. Right. Yeah.
I think this is also the issue where we get introduced to, I guess he's a general. I don't know if he works for S.H.I.E.L.D. or the Army, but the General Argyle Fist. And I have to say, that's the greatest name Kirby's ever given a kid. Argyle Fist.
Argyle Fist, who gets like a weird B plot. Nick was saying this to me the other night. Like, it's a weird
I
B
love
plot
this.
that Kirby just does not give up on. He's just like, we got to keep combing this goddamn desert. Like, I don't
like every issue has like 3 returns to this B plot, and it's like 7 pages every issue where it's just like them. It's like the 2 stormtroopers like wandering around the desert looking for the droids, right? Like, they're just like we got this special machine with ground penetrating radar, and we're gonna keep looking for them. And then we don't find them. All right, go get the helicopter in the air. We'll find them, and they're down here somewhere. And he like won't abandon this plot. Like
it's great, but it like speaks to the dedication of the armed services to find their people, right? I think that is the implication here, is that like that they don't just give up, right? If they just because they can't find something, they know something's out here, so they're going to do everything that they can and look in any corner that they possibly can in order to find. I mean, like, yes, it is drawn out. Yes, it is multiple pages of things to try to maybe fill up to that 17-page mark that they probably need to hit. But I do think that you could read into a little bit more if you really squint, you know?
Yeah. I mean, that's why I took, I don't know if you guys saw that screen cap I took where it's like, is this rocky terrain in Southwest America, or is this a close-up of the Thing? You decide.
Yeah, I mean, again, Kirby just wants to draw that cool, the hound dog, like thing that they're riding around trying to find the underground. He just wants to draw cool machines. And to draw a cool general named Argyle Fist. Like sometimes Kirby just, like you said, he just wants to draw weird shit and like just let him do it. And it's entertaining comics. So,
well, I mean, you know, for him, I think that's like priority number 1, right? Like that's really, you know, he's an artist first, and so he comes up with interesting ideas, and you know, it's certainly, you know, bass backwards to Stan Lee, and that's fine. That's great. Like,
I mean, but this whole run is littered with like weird machineries and like backgrounds and stuff that are just full of doodads and gadgets, and it just, I mean, like, I know that the original pages they look one way, but then you look at them on Marvel Unlimited, which is where I read it, and they're like vibrant and brilliant, and you're like, holy shit, this is fucking cool to look at, right? Oh, like, despite the story, you're like, what a cool 2-page spread that I'm looking at right now. It's so cool.
Yes.
Just like walls of machines where you're this looks complicated. I don't understand what that thing is for, or what it does, or where any of these pipes go, or what these buttons could practically do.
But it doesn't need to make sense. It doesn't need to make sense because like in the moment you're getting Captain America and Falcon's like impression on a room, and you just see this huge thing that's happening. And especially in the later issues where they're doing these big, huge 2-page spread fights, and you get all this different stuff. I mean, Paul, I think we'll get to it, but like, Kirby really. At times you could tell he's just like, I want to draw some cool machinery stuff, so let's make it happen. Let's find a reason to put Cap and Falcon in a room where I can do that.
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, he wants to make every page exciting, and I think there's at least one panel on every page where there's something really just mind-blowing, and it's like, wow, how can he just keep doing this issue after issue, you know? So I think 195 is the issue where we get it's the World of 1984, which is an amazing issue because they're trapped with the freaks. They're going to get the DNA pituitary gland lobotomy surgery. They break free. They don't realize that they captured Captain America and Falcon, so they bust out, and they meet up with Cheer Chadwick, who's this bubbly, cheerful woman who has a connect to the elite. And she takes him to basically like a hate rally. She takes him to a fucking like 1984 Big Brother hate rally. That page is amazing. And again, talk about a comic that feels prescient. Like there's a part where literally Falcon is watching this face on a screen that's saying "Beware the Freedom Freaks" with a big American flag behind it.
And they're like, that's not even real. That's not even a real person. That's like a computer composite.
Crazy moment there.
Right.
Falcon literally says, who is this guy? The new Hitler? Like, it's not even, again, not subtle at all.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
I mean, they go on to like hang some doll that's like got the word freedom freak. It's like truly a hate rally. It's crazy.
Yeah, because they beat up this effigy and they say, freedom freaks rock the boat. They're a menace, and like the big brother face is saying that your hatred like unites us, like it gives us purpose. Like it's so bizarre. And then there's a close up of his face where he's screaming, "This is wonderful. This is glorious. Like I declare this a day of joy." Like this feels so prescient. It's incredible to think about Kirby writing this 50 years ago and just being so on the nose about everything.
Yeah, I mean and we get that just like in general with like the entire I don't know, like the entire vibe of the enemy in this book is just like the rising fascism, right, of the world. And I mean, like, was this I don't recall this. I didn't read this in any history books in 1975, but I don't know, history books are edited significantly for people like me. I don't know.
Well, I think you saw Kirby sees the conservative reaction to the hippie movement. I think Kirby is sympathetic with the hippies. If you read The Forever People, the book he did for DC right before this, like he's very sympathetic to hippies and the youth movement. So he sees a conservative reaction against that. He clearly had at least read a synopsis or the spark notes of the book 1984. He's like, all right, I can do that. Like that fits.
Yeah.
It's right there in the title of the comic. It's but again, I think it again speaks to, as bombastic and unsubtle as his work is, it does have a uniquely personal vibe to it. It does have something. He's trying to say something important. He's using the dialogue and vocabulary of superhero comics to do it, but he's making an important point. It's important to him. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I think the next issue might be my favorite, actually, issue 196, Kill Derby. Again, Jack went and saw Rollerball in the theaters. Like, I got to put that on my comic. That's literally what it is. And Mike, you mentioned it earlier. I love the way Kirby uses double page spreads, because in this issue, you got that double page spread of him fighting like 8 dudes at once. It is amazing. I spent at least 5-10 minutes just poring over those 2 pages. It is some amazing, amazing comics. It's Captain America. He's like punching one dude with his shield, smashing a helmet. There's a guy behind him he's fighting off. There's literally like 9 dudes all on top of Captain America, and he's just fighting his way through them. It's an amazing work of art.
Yeah, it's one of those things that like Jack always does best, right? When big, huge action happens, like he spares no inch on the page to add as much as he can to it, right? Like the ridiculousness of that entire thing is so fun, because it's like motorized skateboards, which again, cool little technology thing that he gets to put on. He's trying to figure out like what's hip with the kids, because I mean, like I genuinely, because you think about it, like I've heard interviews of Jack Kirby where he's talked about, he's like, well, I've got to like learn about all this new stuff that's coming out because I need to make it relevant to the comics that I'm going to write. Like, I can't just keep talking about the things of my own youth. I have to figure out what's happening now, and I have to incorporate it into my books. And like, as hokey as it is, as ridiculous as it is, it's super fun to see him try to take something that was probably fairly new to the American mainstream in the 1970s and try to like put it into this comic, make it relevant to Captain America. Like, the insanity of this like Kill Derby that they're doing it's ridiculous. There's no explanation for it. They're just like 2 teams go run into each other and then they kill each other. And it's like, fucking what? Okay, whatever.
We're gonna call you the Reds and the Blues. Read into that as deep as you want.
Right. It's ridiculous, but like it allows for pages like this to happen where there's so much action and like insanity happening, right? Like for no reason, Falcon is on a skateboard and then he goes, fuck this, and he just starts flying. Like, yeah, of course. Exactly. Why wouldn't he? But he started on the skateboard, right? It's so ridiculous. But it is a lot of fun. It's like very fun, over the top comics that you don't have to think too hard about if you don't want to. And you get these double page spreads like Paul was talking about. It's great.
Yeah. The action this issue is fantastic. Don't forget their quote unquote trainer for their Kirby Kill Derby team is Tinkerbell, this huge woman with this huge helmet. And she's like, this incredible stuff. And then there's a moment where like what I love too is like, again, Kirby, he's doing superhero comics, but Captain America as a character is always like fighting as a last resort. There's a moment where he's just like, someone steals his shield, and he literally says, if my shield is used in a bloodbath like this, it's going to destroy what it means. Like, it's not even what the shield itself. It's like what the shield represents. If it's used in this spectacle, it's going to destroy everything I stand for. So he has to get his shield back. As a moment he confronts the guy who stole his shield and says, we don't have to resort to violence. We can just we can talk about this and work. And like, I love that Kirby's always like, hey, violence isn't necessarily the answer. I'm going to draw the hell out of it when it happens, but it's kind of the last resort.
yeah. No, but you're right though. I think like we even in this run, we don't see Captain America try to strike first. It's always espionage first. It's always trying to talk his way out of a situation, and then he gets to the fight because they've given him no option. And you know that he's going to win because he's Captain America, and he doesn't fucking lose, right? Because he's the good guy. Like I love that. I totally agree with you there, Paul. Like if you read this, it's very clear that Captain America is written to not be like a violence first character, even though it always ends up going to violence.
Right. Well, I also love that he's willing to get into a fight in order to not be dragged into the actual roller derby. You know, because they're like you're gonna be on this team, and he's like, fuck you guys, and he's like he's fighting them to keep them from making him fight other people.
Right.
And I was like, there's a logic to this. It's a little twisted, but there's a logic to this.
Right.
And I think, you know, again, it's a little on the nose, but like, you know, I was thinking about this, you know, because Mike, I had been sent a couple like YouTube shorts of this like economist guy in the last couple days, and he was talking about, you know, the modern state of the economy and
Nick's leaking DMs over here. Jeez,
and you know, stuff about Elon Musk, surprise, and you know, the idea, much like Squid Game, of this idea that like if you can convince the people that, you know, if you live in a society where 1% gets this pot of gold and everyone else suffers, well, who cares about the other 99 as long as, you know, you're in that 1% getting the pot of gold.
Exactly.
Or, you know, in the case of, you know, Squid Games, I don't know, whatever you win money,
$1
right?
billion
I didn't watch it.
I don't remember what it was. Yeah.
But that was the, you know, analogy that the economist made. And obviously here you've got the same situation where, you know, they're, you know, Cap wants to duke it out before this thing even starts, and one of his teammates, you know, says, "Fool, there's a pot of gold waiting for whoever lives to reach it," right? Which I think is also like a really interesting way of putting it, right? Like it's not guaranteed to you, like you will just need to be the one or the few that actually make it to the end, and what happens to everyone else in the meantime, right? Again, it's not subtle, but it does require, I think people can sort of extract that, which, you know, is worth it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Again, I think Kirby's trying to make sense of the modern pop culture that he's seeing. It's like, yeah, everyone's driven by greed. Not that that's a new thing, but just like I think he's putting it in terms of, you know, this story, and why people would join up. Why would anyone join up with the elite? You know, so that's why he's kind of putting it there.
I do love that it is literally a pot of gold, and it literally looks exactly like, you know, the sort of like, it looks like the one straight out of a fucking Lucky Charms commercial.
I genuinely thought that they kept just saying pot of gold as in like a phrase, and then they get to the end and it's literally like a giant pot overflowing with gold doubloons. Like Jack is far from like metaphor. It's only what's written, right? There's nothing else. It's great.
In the same vein, I drew this weird little connection. Again, you know, I got this stupid English degree, which means I can find these stupid things and then decide that it makes sense. But did anyone else find it interesting that the uniforms of the Royalist Army or guards were gold and green?
Yeah.
You know, the colors of money and the colors of wealth. And again, maybe those are just the colors Jack picked, and I am just like, I am going to find connections here. But like, maybe he just thought that was cool, and I'm just fucking poking at nothing here. But I don't know.
I mean,
I think
you could be right. Yeah. They were very like they did make there was a point to make them shiny, right? Because like if you look at Kirby's work overall, right, he loves a good uniform. Like he just loves to draw guys in very weird uniforms. Like it's throughout this book. Like even later at the when we get to the end,
except
where these guys
if you work for
working,
S.H.I.E.L.D.
Well, if they're working on the Mad Bomb, right? They're like in these over the top like gas mask things. So I do think that you might be onto something there, Nick, because they did make sure to show like these big conical helmets that are shiny gold. So So that'd be interesting. And it's not all the guards. It is like the quote unquote elite guards who get that, because they do have like this caste system within the group. So you might be onto something there, Nick. Get at us in the comments, everybody, and tell Nick that he's wrong and that Jack just
somebody
like to
reach
draw
out to Jack.
Yeah, someone reach out to the Kirby estate.
Somebody get out that Ouija board and we'll.
Yeah.
Jack's working on levels that we haven't reached yet. That's what I'm saying. Jack saw stuff that we're just finally figuring out. The next issue, that's the one, the rocks are burning. That's when the armory finally finds the secret base. That's a huge, exciting issue. That's basically one big fight scene where the army storms the elite's headquarters there. They break up the Kill Derby. They rescue Cap. Cap gets to lead a bunch of guys into battle. Jack loved drawing that. It's a big action-packed issue. I have to talk about the love issue, the next one, which is, I'm not sure what this point of this comic is. I like it because it's so bizarre, but it's Captain America's love story. The only thing I can think of is, again, Jack Kirby and Joe Simon not only created Captain America, but after World War II, they kind of like invented the genre of romance comics. They were one of the first people to do romance comics. So I feel it's like Jack is going back to that well.
No,
but it's go ahead.
Paul, I understand where you're coming from, and I appreciate the fact that there is historical like justification for all this. If this is what Jack Kirby thought as romance, I really hope that him and his wife are okay, because it is the most. Cap does all the talking in this relationship that they have. They literally say 4 words to each other, and then they both go, I can tell that you're a good person with a good heart. I can see those blue eyes, that you had a true heart and you weren't going to hurt me even though you snuck into my it's so weird. And then they go and meet on a beach and like they have a nice picnic while Falcon's doing all the fucking work. It's so like, I don't know. I understand there's only so many pages in a comic book, and there's only so much time to tell this romance story, but where is the romance? I don't know. Like, it's just like pages happen, they say a couple words, and then suddenly I love you, but we can't be together ish, something like that. I don't know.
But that's the thing, it's not even necessarily a love story. So the whole idea is they find out the guy who invented the technology for the mad bomb, they find his like house, they're going to get him. He's not there, but his daughter, who's like suffering, it's not specific, but it's just like a nervous disease. Like she's like either shy or can't leave the house. She's dealing with something. And Cap is just like nice to her, and like he's trying to get her out of the house. So Falcon can, fight off. They're going to storm the house to get the guy, right? There's a huge fight that breaks on the house. She can't be here when this fight happens. He's trying to save her. It's framed as a love story, but I think it's just Captain America. It's to show his good inherent goodness is going to look after this woman who needs help.
Yeah.
That's my generous reading of it. Yeah.
You're not wrong. I just like, they call it a romance story, and I'm just like, boy, man, women had it tough in the 70s, I guess.
Well, it's kind of all just a setup to get Steve Rogers in the old Charles Atlas, ad where he's on the beach and someone hits him in the head with a beach ball.
Sure. I did find that to be very funny. It's just like a bunch of dinguses show up and like, what are you going to do about it? And Captain America's like, I'm going to lift this fucking boulder over my head. I don't know. What do you want to do something now, buddy? Like,
it's great.
That is pretty funny. That was very funny.
There is the one page in that issue where we see the agents for the elite are storming the house and Falcon's fighting him off. This is one page, and that page is amazing. I'll have to grab a screen cap of that to put in the notes, because that is just an amazing page where it's these guys that look like gangsters storming the house. They all got guns. They're all facing different directions, and Falcon's flying above them. It's awesome.
I mean, that is one of the scenes that I really appreciated about like the actions, like the action in this issue, in the previous issue where S.H.I.E.L.D. shows up in the base. Like, there are some moments that I feel like we don't ever see in comics nowadays, where you've got guys interacting with something off panel, but they're facing you. Right? Yeah. Jack does this in a lot of his books. I know I've seen it in plenty of other comics, where there are people who are looking like just off page, but they're facing you and they're reacting to something as if you are a camera in the middle of something. You're not witnessing it from far away. You are literally in the middle of the shit. And I love that so much. Like, you don't see artists do that anymore, because I think it is a little unsettling when you see it in comics. But the way when Jack does it, it never feels weird. I don't know, but maybe Paul, you seem to recognize what I'm talking about. But there are multiple times in this book in action scenes where like people are looking off panel, or like their hands are almost stretching beyond the frames of the comic in order to like portray something bigger than that's going on.
And I don't know if that's just Jack, him drawing on his experiences in combat. Again, he was in the Battle of the Bulge. Like, he saw some shit in World War II. He wasn't sitting in the office like his friend Stan. He was actually there fighting. So I think those like the way you put it, they are unsettling because they're so chaotic. There's shit everywhere, and like there's people fighting in different places. It's just like, then the way he draws panic in people's eyes, like, it's very visceral. Like, I think he's really capturing something probably that he witnessed firsthand. Next issue, 199, The Man Who Sold the United States. That's where we find out the background. The scientist, Harding, he was experimenting with sonics that got perverted into the mad bomb. Not a lot happens in that issue, but, we do get the big reveal of the giant bomb, Big Daddy, that they have to go fight. Have to go stop. The whole time they're trying to find Big Daddy. Forgot to mention that earlier.
Yeah. The mad bomb itself is, they give it different. I mean, it's Kirby playing with the idea, the ridiculous names of the atom bombs, right? Like, which I think is fun. Fat man, little boy, right? Like, it's very fun in the sense of like, it's ridiculous, but it's played serious throughout the story, right? I don't know, maybe we're just reading this 50 years later, but it is played very, very serious. Like, everyone's like, Big Daddy's gonna explode. It's like, what, dude?
Whoa, shit. The big finale here, issue 200, which I love that not only is this building up to the bicentennial of the United States, it builds up to issue 200 of Captain America. That obviously that was on Jack's mind. That final issue is so great. And again, we hinted at this earlier. At the beginning of that issue, it's not that they're storming the base to stop it. They're sneaking in. Like, Cap is like leading a strike force. Like, we're going to go in. There's even a moment, it's like, if we play our cards right, we don't even have to fire a shot. We'll use surprise. We'll take all the guards out and we'll be in. Like, and the way it's drawn, the way that they have the shield agents in like fatigues, it feels like a World War II comic. And again, it's drawing on Jack's experience. That whole buildup is really great. Of course, it doesn't go that way. There is a big knockdown, drag out fight, big action scene. We get the reveal that, Cap has to go confront William Torrey to stop the elite. Falcon has to go stop the mad bomb. That whole page where Falcon is like pulling the big lever back to overload the mad bomb and it's driving him crazy while he does it. It's so
cool. I mean, I love the parallel story that we got there, where like Falcon is in Philadelphia, Cap is somewhere else as this nice big party is going on, and like Cap happens to like that he sneaks in well enough that like as Tori is talking about like this Captain Stephen Rogers, Cap is like right behind him, right? Like he's like, well, then you probably want to talk to me, like, so good. And then meanwhile, all the action's happening in Philadelphia as Falcon is taking out these guys very slowly, and the shield agents are sneaking in, but only Falcon has the strength to actually stop the mad bomb. I mean, like, it's very well done. I did really enjoy this last issue, just because of like, it does crescendo in a way that is super satisfying given the previous issues. Like, it really does boil together at like a really nice ending for the story, I think. I did expect it to be like a 45-page issue, though, because it was at issue 200, but like still in like 18 pages, which was crazy.
Yeah, you wouldn't find that happening these days.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
$9.99 issue, 50 different covers.
Well, here's the thing.
100 variants by Jim Lee.
Right.
They were saving that for the big oversized bicentennial battles. That's another issue. That's another episode where we bicentennial battles. That's the big oversized magazine size issue that Kirby did, where Captain America goes back in time and meets Benjamin Franklin. Fucking awesome.
I see.
Okay. Why didn't we read that? No.
I would love to. I suggested it, but I just don't think we had time to read it. That's like an 80-page issue. That's like its own separate thing. And trust me, if you thought the Mad Bomb was crazy at times, I'll just say involves Captain America astral projecting into the past. So that's like
listen, in 2076, when we hit the 300-year anniversary of not only the United States, but because I read comic books will still be going. We'll read it then.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. The bicentennial battles.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I'm glad that you guys were down to read this stuff. Again, I think they're really interesting comics. I think it's strangely uneven story just because it maybe goes on one or two issues too long. Like, it kind of loses the plot with the love story. As much as I love Kill Derby, it doesn't really add much to the overall story. That should have been its own standalone thing. But I think there is something that I really enjoy about reading this era of Jack Kirby, where it's so on the surface. You know what I mean? Everything he's doing is just right there. And I think it's easy to brush it off as saying like, oh, it's just Jack being over the top, or like his writing is just too exaggerated. But like he is saying something important. And I love the fact he uses superhero comics to really express his personal experiences and beliefs. And it comes through in this story a lot.
Yeah, I had a great time overall. Like Nick and I talked a little bit about like how each issue was very long despite being extremely short, but like having read this over like a week's time, like I tried to read like a couple of issues every day. That actually was the right pace. I think sitting down to read all issues in one sitting would be a mistake for anybody. So sorry if you did that when I told you to pause at the start of the episode, but I do think like if you pace yourself with some of these older books, they are a little tough, but ultimately like they do read fast, and they do feel like you're getting like a good chunk of story every single issue. To your point though, Paul, like there is some stuff that's a little superfluous. The B plot with Argyle, General Argyle or Captain Argyle, whatever, is a little long, but overall, if you I think in a different world, this would have been edited from the start a little bit, and it would have been probably the most concise story told in 6 issues that was chunky, like a full sandwich with a side of chips and a drink in 6 issues, right? I think that would have been perfect. Instead, it's a little bit longer, but it works. I think like especially in issue 200, the payoff is so good. I think it's totally worth everything else.
Nick, any final thoughts on the Mad Bomb?
I mean, I think I really appreciate that no one's ever going to accuse Jack Kirby of not understanding what this story was about. I think, unfortunately, in modern comics, you have some writers, and I don't blame some of them, who try to get a little subtle or create some plausible deniability about, oh, well, you're just reading into this, or, oh, this is just a book about superheroes. Because there obviously are, unfortunately, if not a large group, a loud group, of individuals who want comic books to be purely escapism, and they want them to be devoid of any sort of socio-political discussion about the way things are or the way things should be. And so, some of their books, like I said, there's, some plausible deniability, or you're like, oh, well, this is just a superhero book. Like, why are you reading X into this? Why are you reading, Y into this? And no one's going to do that with this book.
Yeah.
And
there's no subtext. So
yeah, exactly.
Appreciate that. Yeah. So, there's something to be said for the fact that this book, isn't afraid to just completely pound you on the head, even if it certainly feels like, it really is a story of both Jack and Captain America being like, I understood where things were in the 40s. I understood, what we were fighting for. I understood who the enemy was. And now I'm kind of like, this is a brave new frontier, we're staring down. And maybe it is a little of, old man yells at cloud, but that doesn't mean the old man is wrong.
Sure.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's fine. I appreciate it. And I would encourage people to read this, because I certainly think when people talk about reading Kirby or getting an opportunity to read Kirby, this is definitely not what I've seen recommended. This typically isn't what I would consider what immediately comes up. But I think if you're someone who was interested in reading Kirby or wanted to read Kirby, as you said, it's depressingly, it's very relevant.
But
there are some parallels.
It's interesting though, at how relevant it feels, and yet at the end of the story, and I think throughout the whole story, it is inspiring, right? There is like this pervasiveness of like, despite the efforts of the bastards, we will not. The bastards will not prevail, right? Like I do appreciate that there is a hopeful message at the end of it all, that like the justice and righteousness will find its way throughout like despite the efforts and the machinations of those who wish to do ill will towards like the people of America. Like I do appreciate that. And like, I am not a super patriotic person, right? But like, there is a part of me that finds this to be very inspiring overall.
No, I think that's right. I mean, again, I think Kirby comes from an older generation where patriotism means something else. You know, again, he's someone who literally fought and killed for his country, so he's biased, you know, but
Sure.
I think he's someone that also recognizes the flaws. Again, that's in this comic, as we talked about. He's acknowledging that history hasn't always been perfect, but, you know, the Captain America is a symbol of what America should be and should represent. That never wavers. Like Kirby, that's never changed the story. Like Captain America never doubts his mission. It's like, nope, I'm here to prevent someone from corrupting what I represent, you know, and I think that's the through line to the whole story.
Yeah. Perfect.
It's great stuff. Yeah. Again, if come for the politics, but stay for the kill derby. That's what I'll say.
Show up for the part where he rides a horse on a date.
Yeah. We did not mention Steve Rogers,
and then beats up these guys on the beach who throw their beach, and errant, you know, volleyball gets thrown his way, and he turns it into a moment to pontificate with them, and they're like, we don't want to hear a speech, and then she's like, dude, you're kind of a dick.
Right. I mean, and he was wearing that very dashing sweater. I mean, like, there are some moments of the romance story that are kind of fun, I guess, if
it's
we're being
weird.
honest.
I love it. It's weird. I was down with it. I was 100%.
But,
you know,
but, Paul, this was a great read. I really appreciate you bringing this to us. I never thought I'd want to actually go out and buy like a nice tome of an old Captain America story until now, and I think I've been convinced after today's discussion, so thank you for that. But yeah, thank you, Nick and Paul, for helping us today. I mean, Paul, do you have any final words? I'll give you the final word on this before we wrap up here.
You know, I think we kind of covered all the bases here. Again, I just want to reiterate, I think this comic works for me. Again, the artwork is amazing. I think there's some incredible action scenes, some incredible visuals. But again, it speaks a testament to how creators like Kirby can use comics to talk about pop culture and politics in a way that still is relevant. Like, it doesn't feel dated, unfortunately. You know, it's a very relevant comic, and I think it's definitely worth your attention if you've not read it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Nick and Paul, for tonight. Thank you, Brian, for proof listening. This has been fantastic. If you haven't checked out the IRCB zine, I gotta do the self plug. I have to. IRCB.FYI/zine. Go back. Totally Not a Cult. It's very fun. It's gonna be fantastic once this thing gets printed. But hopefully, assuming we're at 80% as we're recording right now, so fingers crossed still. But anyways, thank you all for listening. You are fantastic human beings. Thank you, Zander, for editing. And until next time, comics are good, and so are you.